Dustin Baker, VikesNow, the Thursday, June 16th edition. I didn't record yesterday because I have COVID right now, and day one was shitty. It was not what I expected. I thought I'd have a sore throat. I thought I wouldn't be able to taste food, but that wasn't the case. I can taste food just fine. It almost feels enhanced, my sense of taste and smell, and I don't have a sore throat. What I did have in the first day was an incredible fogginess on my brain. It felt like I had a perpetual, terrible hangover, and I couldn't think straight, and I felt clumsy. So I took yesterday off, and thankfully, my wife helped me find a medicinal cocktail that works, which is Tylenol, a little bit of ibuprofen, and then alcohol-free Dayquil and NyQuil. And I say alcohol-free because I've told you guys before that I'm a recovered alcoholic, and NyQuil is like 10% alcohol, so a guy like me drinking that, not a good mix. I'm a fiend. I took the day off because I couldn't think straight. Feeling markedly better now, so we're here to talk about the Vikings. Here we go. We're talking about the takeaways from Minicamp. I know it was a week ago, but I was on vacation, and I want to make sure we document those for the record because I consider this show kind of a video showcase of the record of all events pertaining to the Vikings, at least out of the gate here. We'll get everything documented. So, mandatory minicamp lasted 2 days. Kevin O'Connell said everybody looked fabulous. We don't have to do a third day. Kind of a cool trend in the NFL. And now we're done with Vikings events until the end of July when they release training camp dates, which they strangely haven't done yet. But I presume it'll be end of July, early August. So the 7 things, again, not cool enough to have a graphics department where I'd list them off here. Hopefully we'll get there. Number one thing, these aren't in any order of importance. So just bear with me. These 7 things are shooting from the hip like I usually do. We have an open offensive line battle at a couple spots, which we sort of already knew but didn't have it confirmed. The center job is not necessarily Garrett Bradbury's. That is up for a summer, like we usually do kicker competitions. The center job is open, and prior to last week, all of the good, warm and fuzzy things were said about Garrett Bradbury, but when the rubber hit the road in Eagan, Minnesota, it's going to be more of an open gig for who gets that center job. Now, Bradbury is probably the front runner because he's got first-round draft stock, but not Jesse Davis, Chris Reed or Austin Schlottman could realistically win that job if this plan by Bradbury to put on weight doesn't work. So, out of the gate, take what you've learned about Bradbury as the guy in September and pump the brake on it because we're not sure if that is preordained yet. It could reasonably be Chris Reed or, as a long shot, Austin Schlottman. Additionally, a big moment or development from this OL battle at minicamp was that Jesse Davis looks like the guy at right guard. I have no idea why Ed Ingram won't sign his contract and get in the building. He's still there. But he is one of these holdouts, so to speak, that hasn't signed his rookie contract. And based on where he was drafted, he sure as shit better start at right guard or somewhere because second-round offensive linemen, that's their job, is to start most of the time right away. But he isn't quite there yet. So it looks like until Ingram gets on the field in a starting capacity, that Jesse Davis from the Miami Dolphins, who usually played tackle, could be the right guard, a spot the Vikings desperately need to solve because it's been a pain in the ass from Dakota Dozier, Drew Samia to Oli Udoh. All right, number 2, Danielle Hunter. Newsflash, he will be fine in a different defensive setup. The Vikings will run a 3-4 defense for only the second time in team history. When they did it in the 80s, it was a one-hit wonder. It wasn't even a hit. It was just a one-time wonder. They tried it out, so we ain't doing that no more. It went back to a 4-3. And all you've known and loved from your Vikings is a history of 4-3 defenses, especially as of late, because Zimmer was like the claim to fame 4-3 guy. But now Ed Donatel comes in with a 3-4 defense, more along with the modern times of the NFL, and Danielle Hunter is going to be asked to stand up and be an outside linebacker, whereas before he's always been opposite Everson Griffin, been an defensive end in Mike Zimmer's system. But by all indications, Hunter is there, first of all. No contract bullshit. He is there in attendance, and he looks phenomenal in a 3-4 defense. So if you had any reservations about how are these guys going to adapt, well, at least their best player on defense is going to make the transition just fine. That's number 2. Number 3 is that this defense, the Vikings defense, might actually be good. Here's the deal. When the Vikings hired an offensive-first head coach in Kevin O'Connell, there was always a temptation to believe that, all right, well, this guy's going to focus on offense, kind of like Mike Tice did for a handful of years in the 2000s, and the defense is just kind of an afterthought, and that's chilling on the back burner. It doesn't feel like it's going to be that way with Ed Donatel in charge. And plus, the Vikings have very, very good defensive starters. The depth we can argue about for a while. I think the depth is skimpy on defense, and they're hoping that a bunch of these reservist guys are actually good. But there is a real possibility that this defense, we're so accustomed to Zimmer usually having a good defense, could be a lot better than what we've seen in the last 2 years. And always remember that Zimmer's undoing was the last 2 seasons' shitty defense that collapsed in the crucial spots of games. That will arguably, if Donatel could just fix that, stop giving up effing points in the final 2 minutes of halves, the Vikings could easily be in the playoffs. They would have been last year if they had a magic wand and could erase all of the scoring by opponents at the end of the second and fourth quarter. Zimmer's defense on the whole for the Vikings was fantastic. I know you're sour on 2020 and 2021. There's a recency bias in your memory that, well, he really wasn't that good of a defensive coach. Yes, he was. If you look at all of the numbers from 2014 to 2021, even including those 2 not good seasons on defense, Zimmer's defense was wonderful. And when they hired an offense-first head coach, there was always a fear that, we don't really care about defense anymore. However, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, after hiring the offense-first head coach, has spent the entire offseason with transactions building the defense. They haven't really done shit on offense besides signing Jesse Davis and Chris Reed and then arguably drafting Ed Ingram and, Ty Chandler. But on the whole, it's been a defensive offseason per personnel transactions while bringing and merging an offensive brain in the house. So the defense might actually be pretty good, and it doesn't have a huge standard as of late because in the last 2 years, as you know, the Vikings' pedigree of defense has collapsed. That's number 3. Number 4 is Kellen Mond, and I talked about this in the last show and a couple of these in the last show, so I apologize for being redundant, but I want to make sure we get these documented. Kellen Mond, if he's not already the QB2, will have a chance to win that damn job. He's not going to be pigeonholed. He's not going to be banned from QB2 duty. Nobody has weird grudges against him anymore. The coaching staff seems to embrace him. Kellen Mond was drafted in the 3rd round of the 2021 NFL Draft, and now, with the new coaching staff, he'll get a chance to effectuate that draft stock into a QB2 job for the Vikings. I've said it 100 times on this show. There is one reason why who wins QB2 is important. Because, cover your ears, there's always a chance that the Vikings this season, out of the gate, still with Cousins in charge, go 8-9, 9-8, whatever, miss the playoffs. They will not want to continue the Cousins experiment, in my opinion, if they miss the playoffs for the 3rd year in a row with this bullshit mediocrity stuff. Then, if Mond is the QB2, at least you'll know in practice, perhaps in stretches of games, maybe down the stretch if they're not going to reach the postseason, you'll know if you have a commodity in Mond for life after Cousins. That's why whether or not he can win the QB2 job is so crucial. If he can't, if it's Mannion again, you never want to see Mond again as a starter. Because if he can't at year 2 win a backup quarterback job, then he ain't going to lead the Vikings to the promised land. That's my opinion anyhow. Nonetheless, I don't know that he would have gotten a fair shake with Zimmer and the boys in charge because of the weird draft grudge. Spielman wanted a quarterback, Zimmer wanted a defensive player, yada, yada, yada. And, we saw when Zimmer said not particularly about wanting to see more of Mond that there was some weirdness going on there. But this summer, we already saw proof in the pudding 1 week ago. Mond is going to get a fair shake to be the backup quarterback. The next one is Greg Joseph. When camp broke last week, he looked like the front runner to win the kicker job because Gabe Burchich from Oklahoma didn't look good at all. Well, Burchich got cut a couple days later and got signed by the Packers, who will now battle Mason Crosby for a job. Quietly, Mason Crosby had a terrible year last year, and I think that's why the Packers are bringing in competition to push him to the limit and say, hey, you got it, old man, because we got these other dudes who are nipping at your heels. But a significant takeaway from minicamp and then subsequent a few days later is that Greg Joseph is going to be the kicker for the 2022 Vikings. Whether or not that's good or bad is up to you. It's probably good. The guy showed some gumption bouncing back from a horrendous gaffe against the Cardinals, and now he's going to get a sequel with a new coaching staff, and hopefully we can finally solve this damn kicking thing once and for all, because it's from Blair Walsh to Kai Forbath to Dan Bailey to Daniel Carlson. Screwed up the order there. And most recently, Joseph. It's been a weird ride inside the Zimmer regime for kickers, and you know all about it because you can feel it in your bones. Second to last item is that Irv Smith Jr. was indeed hurt, injured in a walking boot. Now, this will probably fall in the ash heap of history that the guy was hurt in June. Who cares? He's back and ready to go for training camp. However, if he was out, this would be how it would start. You know, if he was going to miss significant time in 2022, him walking around in a boot in June is probably how that book would start. And I've said before, we're jaded because of what what happened with Danielle Hunter in 2020, where we were effectively lied to, or at least the coaching staff was misled and then correspondingly misled us. Thankfully, Irv Smith Jr. is only a WR4, so if he was hurt or missed games in 2022, I can promise you it's not the end of the world. But he was the one man down. He's got a promising trajectory. There's a lot of fans that think he can bust out and be a WR3 type, or maybe down the road a WR2. But for now, he's on the shelf. He's got a bad leg. I don't know exactly what the injury is. They're kind of tight-lipped on that. But because he was in the walking boot in June, you'll want to watch him in late July to figure out if he's good to go. Because if he's not, then this is probably a lingering injury. And the final one, and I'll recap them all here in one sentence, so to speak, is that Irv Smith Jr. is active and he looked good. And why is this significant? Because he tore his meniscus late last summer in that Chiefs game, and then he missed the entire season. I guess there was a theory that perhaps he and Danielle Hunter could have been back for the playoffs if the Vikings were any good last year. Alas, they were not. They were mediocre, missed the postseason by a single win. And then in the spring, it was kind of like, is Irv Smith ready? And I believe somebody within the organization kind of implied they're still slow rolling him back. And we're like, well, what the hell? This is a torn meniscus. This isn't an Achilles. It shouldn't take this long. But your anxieties can be put at bay because Smith did participate in mandatory minicamp last week, which means he's on perfect track to start for the 2022 Vikings. And they need him healthy because they don't have any contingency plans at tight end unless you believe in Johnny Munt as the savior. Tyler Conklin ain't walking through that door. And if they wanted to hedge their bet at TE2, they'd have to sign somebody like Eric Ebron or Jimmy Graham. But the takeaway on the whole about Irv Smith is that he is healthy. He probably wouldn't have been on the field at mandatory minicamp if he wasn't. And that's glorious because he's in a contract year and the Vikings have big plans for him in the offense. So, open offensive line battles. Jesse Davis, front runner at RG. At center, Garrett Bradbury is not automatically the starting center. That's to be determined. Hunter is going to be just fine in a new defensive scheme. The defense might actually be good, and that is an optimistic thing because when you pivot away from a defense coach, there's always a kind of apprehension that you're going to take a step downward, but I don't know that's going to happen. Mond could actually be the QB2. Greg Joseph is your kicker for the 2022 Vikings. Irv Smith Jr. is indeed hurt. Let's see how long that lasts. And Irv Smith Jr. is not hurt. He is back and presumably ready to be the TE1 for the first time in his career for the Minnesota Vikings. I will be back tomorrow, assuming I don't take another weird turn with COVID. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and Skol, baby.